October 20th, 2023 meeting of the Pima County Election Integrity Commission. If you would please stand if you're able and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. And move the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call. Commissioner Atkins. Present. Commissioner DeLarge. Here. Commissioner Mace. Commissioner Caswell. Here. Commissioner Tellman. Here. Commissioner Helen. The chair is here. Commissioner Kirshen. Here. Commissioner Beresny. Here. And Director Hargrove. Call to the public. Do we have anybody that wants to address the commission? At the microphone here, please. And please state your name and for the record.
My name is Bob Dosey. I am the chairman of the Election Integrity Committee for the Republican Party. I just wanted to introduce myself, and tell you a little bit about where our direction is, some of the things we're trying to accomplish. Primarily, the first thing we're trying to accomplish is just understand the entirety of the system and answer a bunch of individual that span a whole broad range of issues for our constituents. And so in that regard, we've been meeting with different people. Two of them were really key and really important that I'd like to recommend. One is the Elections Department staff has been really transparent and open in answering some of our silly questions and some of our hard questions. And I'd just like to put on the record, thank you for the staff. That's been very helpful. And one of the things we did was to go to Runbeck and do a tour just so that we can see inside what they do and have the CEO tell us what to do. And I know that's not necessarily part of the county function, but they're very open for that. And I would recommend it for everyone, and if it was possibly in the county budget, I'd recommend that the county load a bus of you folks up, and so that you can see that part of the process for yourself. It was very informative to us to be able to see what happens up there and how that affects our elections down here in Pima County. So thank you for what you do, and I look forward to interacting with you in the future.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to address the commission? And again, please state your name. You have 3 minutes.
Sure. So, members of the commission, good morning. My name is Peter Norquist, and today I want to speak on the topic of voter rolls and registration. So it's been alleged fairly recently that 4 Arizona counties reported having more voters than voting age adult citizens per public voter registration records compared with Census Bureau data. These were identified as Apache County with 117.4% voter registration rate, Santa Cruz County with 112.6%, La Paz with 100.5%, and Navajo County with 100.1% voter registration rate. It's also been alleged that 9 counties have voter registration rates exceeding 90% of adult citizens over 18 years old, and 1 county with over 80%, which outpaced national voter registration rates in recent years. These counties were identified as Yavapai with 99%, Maricopa with 97.8%, Mojave 95.2%, Yuma 94.3%, Coconino 93.6%, Cochise 93.4%, Pima 92%, Pinal 91.8%, Gila 90.6%, and Graham at 81.1%. That leaves only poor little lonely Greenlee County looking relatively normal relative to the national numbers. And 1% of which the national voter rate sit in these 59.1% per the Census Bureau. In Arizona, these rates were sent in 28.8%, so discrepancy 6.4% in 2020. So discrepancies on this scale almost certainly cannot be attributed to above average voter participation, but instead point to a deficit in list maintenance. It seems clear individuals' current list maintenance procedures need to be modified to identify and remove individuals who are ineligible to vote for various reasons. Why is this a problem? This is directly relevant to something called database latency. When a change is made, an action is taken and then changes are reversed. One example of how this could be leveraged is zip codes could be changed temporarily and ballots could become undeliverable. Someone could then collect those ballots before the zip codes were changed back. The National Change of Address database will not pick up those changes because there's no history. Moreover, those voters could then be added to the inactive voter list. Voters can also be changed from inactive to active and then changed back, and certain things can happen during that transition time. And who would know? With lots of complex footwork, we could eventually tell from their voter history file, depending on the particular regulations of the individual county and state, but months after the election when it's too late to do anything about it. This is clearly a problem in a county where there is, at least on the surface, high voter registration but low voter turnout, and one reason why we need to have publicly accessible cast vote records. Voter roll questions. Has Secretary of State...
Your time is up. Can you wrap it up, please?
I'll wrap it up. I just want to ask if our Secretary of State has followed Section 8 of the National Voter Registration Act, and are we doing that here in Pima County? And that's everything. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you. Anyone else that would like to address the commission? Again, please state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Morning. My name is Tim Locks. I have major concerns over this renewed Thelios contract. I was told, and I know I mentioned it at the supervisor meeting, the former chief deputy told me that this individual only did backup recovery and patching of the Oracle database. I asked her directly, does this individual have access to the data? The answer I received was no. Well, quite frankly, I was not told the truth, or this former chief deputy just simply doesn't understand how an Oracle environment works. I do. When you have the sys or system passwords, you have the keys to the kingdom. You can modify, you can change anything you need to within that Oracle environment. You can turn auditing on and off. You have the ability to modify data, insert data, remove data, or even just look at data. This is a very big concern considering that this individual, I don't care how educated he is, I don't care what his former status was, he's a third-party vendor. He has the ability to transport or transmit voter information across the internet. They, interestingly enough, had their IT, one of the IT directors there, talking about how secure it is. Again, it doesn't matter how secure it is. This individual has the lowest level passwords available and can make whatever adjustments he needs to. And I don't understand. Additionally, the other excuse was we have data that we're migrating from Oracle to SQL Server. Okay, all well and good. But most vendors I ever dealt with in my 37 years all offered migration services. I don't understand why they need to have a former county recorder talking with these individuals. He doesn't work there anymore. There certainly has to be someone else who understands. So I'm absolutely adamantly opposed to this Thelios contract, and once again they threw it in at the last minute like they and have to have a rush vote, just this EIC run back, because they're worried about people like me divulging the information that I just gave you about the accessibility of this individual. And no matter what excuse you're going to get from the county recorder, the simple fact is this individual has full and complete access to everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Again, please state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Gisela Aaron, and I live here in Tucson. I have talked to you about this before. I have talked to the Pima County Board of Supervisors, the City of Tucson, the City Council, and I have talked in front of other counties in Arizona about voter roll maintenance. Eric is a third-party vendor, and they only have 3 employees in a virtual office in Washington, D.C. Do you really believe that they can do voter roll maintenance, 3 people for 28 states? Well, I have proof. Judicial Watch did an expose. I get their information because I'm a member. And they found that Eric shares the data with the Center for Election Innovation and Research, which was also founded, both Eric and SARE were founded by David Becker. And he's a left-wing DNC partisan person. SARE then uses our voter roll information, manipulate it, and send it back to Eric. And Eric then distributes it to the states back. So it looks like they were working on it when in fact another entity has worked on it. And I have proof. I can provide that for you if you like. So I believe we need to talk to the supervisors and to the Maricopa County to get rid of Eric. They received, per Auditor General report in March 22, they received, the Maricopa County, $5 million from the Center for Tech and Civic Life, those are the Zuckerbucks, $5.1 million from the Center for Election Innovation and Research, and I believe to purchase membership in ERIC at the time. And I have this information as well. So ERIC is, the damage has already been done though, because they have now our personal information, they have our social security numbers and our birth date, and that was shared with a left-wing organization. And that's very concerning because they could vote for us. They don't need us anymore. They have our information. And nobody did anything to secure this information. Pima County also outsourced the verification for Runback for the signature verification, and I believe that's also illegal. Have you looked into the laws? Have you looked into whether or not sharing with a private entity is even allowed? We the people are taxed multiple times on ERIC. We've paid for that. We've paid for the county recorder's salary, and we pay for the database AVID to do the record voter roll maintenance as well. We're also paying for the Runback's signature verification, and we're paying for Thelios to run the Oracle database. I mean, we're just charged left and right. And I did a record request to the EAC about packages. I copied you on that. 21 for SL mission decision on 2017, 19, and 21 for SLI. It'll take 2 years.
Could you wrap it up, please?
They said it'll take 2 years to give me this information. April 25 is the estimated when they can provide that. Thank you.
Anybody else that would like to address the commission? Okay. Next item on the agenda, approval of the meeting summaries from the August 18th, 2023 meeting. Does anybody have any additions, deletions, or corrections to those summaries the way they were distributed? Seeing none, they'll stand approved as presented. Update to vote center list to include city-town information for addresses. Commissioner Beresny.
Thank you, Chair Bickle. Had some requests, Ms. Hargrove, and I pulled this down off of the Elections Department webpage. This is the 22 voter center list. If we could just put the city or the area after the street address on this list, because Campbell Avenue is up in the northern part of Tucson and it's down in the Green Valley area. So I've had some requests from folks down in the Green Valley area. If we could just put the city in the address line to help clarify where these locations actually are. Sure. Okay? Thanks. And I just want to say to Ms. Hargrove and to you, Chair Bickle, that the Elections Department was kind enough to sponsor a tour for me last month. And I just want to say, and I shared this with Ms. Hargrove and with Mr. George, that I spent 20 years in telecommunications facilities, crypto facilities, and SCIFs when I worked for the Army. And the security that they have in there and the procedures that they have in place looked really good from my past experiences. So as far as the security and the processes that they use, I just want to give you a public shout out there, Ms. Hargrove. Okay.
Okay, anybody else have any comments on that issue? Update on the election procedures manual, Commissioner Beresny.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Bickle. I know we finished the public comment version. Have Ms. Hargrove, Ms. Chubin, have you heard anything on when that's going to be formalized to go to the Attorney General and to the Governor yet? Where is it at? I've heard some special interest groups saying that they didn't think there was enough there for voter registration and make it easier, and I've heard the other groups say that it's not tight enough for election integrity purposes. So where are we sitting in the process? And then how will it affect the documents that you use, like for your elections procedures manuals, how you run early vote centers, how you do early voting and stuff like that, and what's the kind of like the time frame that you're going to have once that gets approved? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Beresny. Is that how you pronounce your name?
Beresny. I won't give you the East European version,
Oh, okay.
actual
I'd like to
pronunciation.
hear it later because that's my lineage as well.
Whereabouts?
Prussia area?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, my grandparents came from the Eastern Bloc Wars,
Okay,
now
moving
Slovakia.
right along.
She's my homegirl. Come
Yes,
on.
exactly. So unfortunately, there isn't a lot to share because but I will give you an update. The Elections Procedures Manual was submitted to the Attorney General and the Secretary of State on September 30th. You can find the version that was implemented on the Secretary of State's website. My understanding from the Recorders Association meetings with the Secretary of State is that the governor wanted to make some changes, so it wasn't, and then that the way the process will about that it know. Other than the way the process will go is that it will go back to the Secretary of State, probably be reviewed orders to some degree by the includes the election association official, which includes and as soon as we know anything, we will let folks know. But I think the best way to keep an eye on what's happening is on the Secretary of State's website.
Okay.
And as far as the, I'm sorry, do you have more? As far as the, how are we, obviously, it hasn't been approved by by the governor or the Attorney General, and therefore it doesn't hold the force of law. At this time, it is still a guiding document for us in implementing statute that has been passed since the 2019 Elections Procedures Manual, which is what we've been working from.
And I guess as far as our documents and how it will affect us, both the recorder and elections, once it is signed, we have to implement everything that's in that manual. So we will be updating and changing our documents accordingly.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, discussion on the intended use of money being received by Pima County Recorder from the state of Arizona for voter roll maintenance and cleanup. Commissioner Beresny.
Thank you, Chair Bickle. Yeah, so back in either May or June, the county recorder gave us a briefing here at the commission on the different ways that the recorder's office is going through to do voter registration maintenance, voter registration data roll maintenance, okay? Really excited about this. I could see that there was a lot of thought and everything put into this. And so when I saw, first it came to the Board of Supervisors on September 3rd, and then it was pushed back, I think, onto the September 19th. Those days are approximate. But in the second session in September, and I saw the contract, or the grant for $900,000 coming from the state of Arizona to the Recorder's Office for voter registration roll accuracy, or to review the accuracy of the voter registration data. So I'm pretty excited. Okay, you're going to get another $900,000 to work on the accuracy of the voter registration data laws. So then when I started looking through the grant acceptance itself, and I'm going to read right from it, and I included it on some of the background material, Chair Bickle. I go to the discussion. It says, this item is to approve the use of budget authority contingency, allowing the recorder to expend these funds to review the accuracy of the voter registration rolls as outlined in HB 2862. Now, that was from June of 2022 is when that legislation took place. So I went and checked, and I'll get this to Vanessa and to Jeremy. I went and researched that section in the appropriations bill, which was 2862, and then it says these monies shall be used by county recorders to review the accuracy of the voter registration rolls, including whether any registration should be canceled pursuant to section 16-165. So that last phrase there, with the provisions are pursuant to section 1665, wasn't included in the grant acceptance. And first question is, was that just a clerical omission or what? Because it wasn't included in the grant acceptance itself.
Right. I apologize for if it appears that anything was intentionally left out.
Okay.
I also apologize. As you know, I'm here rather than my predecessor, the former chief deputy. And so that submission was made prior to my taking office in this particular position. It was never intentional, but as you, I would have to take a look at that particular statute to see what's included in 16-6.
Well, there's a whole list of stuff on how to clean up the voter rolls.
Right.
In 16-165.
Right, and I believe that the document that you mentioned regarding our voter list maintenance includes those procedures.
Yeah, in this one? Yes, it does.
We are constantly, every day, our voter staff is engaged in voter list maintenance. And so, without taking a look at it and fully understanding the question.
Okay. So I got a couple more questions,
Okay,
and
great.
hopefully you'll be able to answer them. So on the September 19th Board of Supervisors meeting, the Recorder's Office provided this as background material on that specific agenda item. And that was agenda item, regular agenda 18. First page, it was sure that Vanessa and Jeremy, the first page, and I'll make sure that Vanessa and Jeremy get this for the record, Chair Bickle, because I just looked at this last night. First page, 3 bullets, House bill approved allocations from the general fund, state general fund, to review the accuracy of the voter registration rolls. The county recorder will receive the $950,000 over 4 quarters. The Recorder's Office plans to use the funds from the state to continue to strengthen the foundation of the voter registration rules. Those bullets are right on time, okay? Perfect. That's what the intent of the money is for. But then when I go to the second page of what was presented to the Board of Supervisors, some key areas to highlight that we'll see additional investments are staffing to address the increasing needs for accurate and secure voter registration rolls. Perfect, fits right in there. Next bullet, increases in security and ease of use for early voting access. What does that have to do with the accuracy of the voter registration rolls?
Thank you. I can speak to that.
Okay.
One of the ways that we maintain an accurate voter registration roll is in every interaction that we have with the public. So at an early voting site, if our site workers cannot have access to, if there are connection issues, if there are which happen with technology that will be aging out, then what's required is we have to sometimes have a voter vote provisional or have a voter wait. So the access to our live database from our early voting sites is critical in that maintenance. A lot of times what will happen is a voter will show up and they'll say, oh, I didn't realize that my registration was made inactive, which is something that can happen if a piece of election mail is returned to our office. That is one of the ways that we maintain a accurate and secure voter registration roll, because people should be living at the address that they're registered to vote at. So if that registration is returned to us, or if that piece of voter mail is returned to us, then we know that this person may have moved, or they're not receiving that mail, or the person who lives there notices that they got a ballot and says nobody at this address, this person doesn't live at this address, and they return it to us. These are actually the very critical points of contact with the public. The public is to our voters of the voter registration roll. And so at an early vote, I know that was a long answer, but at an early voting site, if somebody comes, and this is very common, somebody comes and their registration is inactive, we want to update their voter address, their residential address, and we can do that right there.
Okay. Okay, I can see the point. And then the third bullet said, expanding outreach materials and voter communications. And so I'm trying to see how this $900,000 would be applied to that bullet, or what chunk of that $900,000 would be applied to that for the accuracy of the voter registration data rolls.
Yeah, I think that my predecessor had allocated, about $30,000 to that. And the reason for this outreach is back to the point of every time we get in front of voters, it will help, any kind of education that we do with voters will help them maintain their voter record. It's a very complicated process, and we're coming up on an election year where we have 3 distinct elections that have very different rules. So the presidential preference has very different rules than the primary. It seems like it should be the same, but it's not. And so we've really beefed up our voter outreach, and this is an opportunity for, like, I can share with you that we are currently in the final stages of a magnet that has important election dates, and our website, and check your voter registration, make sure it's up to date. And we're gonna print about 1,000 of those, or 10,000, sorry, 10,000 of those. And those will be handed out at outreach events, they'll be taken to libraries, those types of things. So that's where that money would be going.
Okay. And so, thank you very much. My last question on this was specifically on the specific light items that you say your predecessor added in there.
Yeah.
And so I think you kind of answered a couple of them, but then what was presented to us a few months ago here on the EIC, how would you apply each one of those line items to one of these ways that you are ensuring list maintenance on the voter registration data rolls?
So I'm happy to go through each line. Is that what you want me to do?
Sure, and how it applies to this document that the Recorder's Office gave us a couple months ago.
So I'll actually start with the document, and then I'll apply it to the item in what was presented in terms of
Okay.
the potential where we would be spending the money. So the list maintenance task A, returned election mail. We send out 90-day notices. We send out notices if a 90-day notice comes back undeliverable, then we send another notification to that voter and say that, your registration will become inactive, not canceled, but inactive. That entire process costs money, obviously. It costs money for the printing of the notices. We're sending notices out, the 90-day notices, to hundreds of thousands of voters. So there's the cost for the printing, there's the cost for the postage, there's the cost for the labor. When we send out 90-day notices, our entire staff and probably 10 to 15 additional intermittent staff are needed to process those notices and update the voter registration that database. So that one in particular is staffing, printing, postage.
Okay.
It can also be the machinery and equipment services. Our staff scans barcodes off of every one of those voter notices has a barcode on it that's associated with that voter record. And so, we have to keep up to date on that equipment as well.
Okay, so on that point, and having in my other life experiences been responsible for creating budgets, wouldn't something like you just said, because when I was an Army civilian on Fort Huachuca, and I had a database administrator and a web developer were working for me on a program I ran for the Army,
Yeah.
that was in my annual budget. So isn't those warranties included in your annual budget?
Yes.
That was presented to the Board of Supervisors a couple
Yes.
months ago?
Yes.
So now there's additional costs?
No, this will offset that to the general fund potentially. I will also say that when we submit our budget to the Board of Supervisors, it's in February of
Okay.
the prior year. So when we submitted the budget for this fiscal year, it was in February of '22.
Really? 18 months, or almost 18 months out?
Well, the fiscal year that we're in
The fiscal year we're in right now, the budget was approved back in June,
yes,
or May or June,
Yes.
yeah. And the tax levy, I think, in August.
yes.
Okay, so I know the other administrative departments within the county start their budget process probably around November, December, carries it
I'm so
through.
sorry, it was 23.
Okay.
February of 23.
Okay.
I apologize for that.
So you're on the same schedule as the departments like the election department or transportation or
Yes,
anybody else?
We are,
Okay.
but it could potentially, when we submit those, it could potentially affect 18 months forward.
Sure.
Because it's the end of the fiscal year. And I will say that the current election that we're engaged in right now, which is the consolidated election and Vail election, those two elections may or may not have been accounted for. I can't speak for my predecessor. And so sometimes when this grant money comes in, it can account for maybe items that weren't budgeted for. But I
Oh.
will say that we did budget for many of these items. And one of the things that we plan to do is send out an election postcard as well. So we have added some additional things The machinery, the machinery refresh cycle is the same.
Okay,
So it would just be that the state would be helping to fund our operations, and that at the end of the year, if we don't use particular general fund monies, we don't use them.
okay. Thanks. And were you going to go through the
Sure.
rest of these? Okay,
Sure,
thank you.
So, the deaths, that's really just staffing.
Okay,
It's information from staffing. Avid, I think we're all aware that we pay, Pima County pays for Avid. I think in last fiscal year, we paid 50,000. We're still talking with the Secretary of State about what our accountability is for this year. They submitted a proposal to the legislature, commission, and I want to say NLRB, but that isn't what it is. I apologize, I don't know the actual committee that it was sent to, and it was rejected. The proposal was to have the Help America Vote Act funds that are federal funds that we receive each year, the state receives, and it's distributed to the counties. Have the cost of Avid taken out of those funds, and then the rest of the funds distributed. But for Pima and Maricopa, it was rejected. In December, the Secretary of State plans to resubmit. So that's why it's up in the air. We don't know what we'll be paying.
okay, so some of this grant money we got could have went to that because you had it budgeted, but that was rejected at the state level.
It was rejected at the state level.
Okay,
And I will just say, because I know Avid is a conversation that comes up a lot, the plan for the Secretary of State is to pass legislation for the 24-25 budget so that HAVA is paid for by the state, so that the counties are no longer liable for any of those costs.
okay.
Okay, the SAVE database is, again, it's just labor. It takes our staff, they're very thorough, and when we have a lot of voter registrations that come in, which often happen right before an election, we had some of the voter registration groups in 22, and we suspect it'll be even greater in 24, dropping off thousands of forms a week. And so,
You think?
yeah, it's a lot of labor. We're very meticulous, and the SAVE database is one of the databases that we check
So you'll be definitely be using that grant money towards that,
towards the labor, yes.
the labor.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Running reports to check for anomalies in the records, again, that's labor. The national change of address is going back to any of the election mail that we send to voters is captured if it is sent back, if it's returned undeliverable. And then we download that data, and a voter's record becomes inactive. It's not canceled, but it becomes inactive until they can update their registration.
so this is a lot of labor-intensive stuff also then?
It's labor, it's also that applies to the mailings as well. It's
Okay.
connected to the mailings and printing costs.
Okay, and none of this is captured, I guess, for the labor in your budget that you submit to the Board of Supervisors? I mean, is there a place where you budgeted, but you now see the possibility of increasing the number of temp workers you have to take care of this stuff? Is that what's happening?
The office has run our staff ragged, honestly. We've operated very lean, and it adds to our overturning, what do you call that? Turnover, thank you. Our turnover, we've got a really solid, good team right now. A lot of institutional knowledge, we want to hold on to them. Hiring temporary staff where we have the space, we're running out of space as well. is one of the things that we've been implementing. We've been training people for the last couple of years in preparation for next year, bringing people in for different elections so that they're ready in '24 and that they are still fresh. So yeah, definitely we have budgeted for intermittent help. It's one of our largest budget items. And we plan to increase that help. The overflow option is down at our ballot processing center when we're not actually processing ballots and doing some data entry and mail processing down there.
Okay.
Notifications, again, that's labor and mail and printing. Postage is one of our biggest, also one of our largest items in our budget.
So you're foreseeing an increase to what you have budgeted already, and so you're applying that grant money to that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Chair Bickle, those are the only questions I have on that agenda item. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Jubin.
Okay. Discussion on Recorder's Office contract for database management support. Commissioner Beresny.
Okay. And I want to preface this before I start, and I am coming from my background of over 35 years, both as a retired soldier, defense contractor, Army contractor, and Army civilian. So, and I have a bachelor's degree in a bachelor of science degree in information systems management, a master's degree in information technology, and I ran Army-wide programs for the Army, Army-wide programs as a civilian. And one of them was for capturing performance of IT services delivered on installations that was used in the Army-wide budgeting process to Congress. So I got back, so I'm a nerd with this kind of stuff, okay? So I just want to preface, that's where I'm coming from with this.
I hope I can answer your question.
I hope so too. Okay, so, and just on the October 3rd Board of Supervisors meeting, when this contract was presented to the Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Christie had requested that this contract come before the EIC, so that's why this has been placed on the agenda. So I'm just going to go through the contract because I got a bunch of questions on it,
Okay.
and then I got a couple other questions afterwards. So when I look at page 1, it says purpose is remote database health management. I did a query on the internet. The parenthetical database health management, I could not find a definition for that. The only instance where I saw database health management was on a website called IndiaWorks, and it was, I guess, a consortium of companies out of India promoting database maintenance. So what does that definition mean?
So what that means to our office is that this consultant will be doing the work that he did for us when he was employed by us, which is making sure that the database is healthy, up to date. There aren't any issues with duplication. We have a duplication site. You may remember that we had an issue with duplication at one time that actually crashed our database, that was the trigger for us hiring Mr. Prasad on emergency procurement.
Mm-hmm.
So he's basically making sure that everything is working and communicating correctly. He has a very niche expertise in not just the Oracle database, but also the Oracle database appliances and the communication. It's not just a server, as you probably know. These are very unique. They're as we're different, and so when we were looking at hiring him as a contractor, we could have gone out and done a search in the community we would never have been able to get somebody with his, with really the needed skills for what the county was able to pay.
Yeah, I saw on the next thing in the procurement method, it was a direct select, so there was no competition. You worked directly with Thelios Incorporated and Mr. Prasad
Yes,
on
we
this
did.
contract.
Yes.
Yeah,
And that was after attempting to use the county's contract for contracted IT personnel and not finding what we needed. And so, yeah, it was a direct select. But I want to emphasize that what Mr. Prasad is doing is what any database administrator would do, which is keeping an eye on the database and making sure that that data is always available to the applications that access it. I'm not a database administrator, so I don't have direct knowledge of what every single task is, but I do know that he's checking. There are reports. We have like the highest level of service with our Oracle database. And so he's constantly checking reports and making sure that things are operating smoothly.
okay, so, you mentioned, and it was mentioned on the Board of Supervisors meeting that Mr. Prasad was employed by
I believe-
county.
Yes.
When did he leave?
I believe it was January of '22. He retired. He retired to deal with some family personal issues.
Okay, and that's fine. So basically, from January of 2022 through September of 2022, the county's recorder's office had no one administering the
No, we
voter
had-
registration database.
No, we had a contractor through Tech Systems, which is the county contract, which is the temporary, consultant.
So there's a basic contract that the IT department has with different vendors in the area.
Correct, and we had a former developer who helped us migrate from our old database to Oracle support us during that time through Tech Systems. So he was putting in about 7 to 10 hours a week, I believe. But when the issue where our database failed, that was where we saw the limitations of his skill set, and he wasn't able to solve the issue. And so that was when we chose to have, to go with Mr. Prasad, because he was able to solve it in about 30 minutes after 3 days.
Okay, so from the Board of Supervisors meeting, you had mentioned that the contractor was building a test lab.
He was, I'm sorry, what?
Building a test lab?
He's not building a test lab. He is, our IT department is building we have a test server, and they haven't started it yet. But that's work that we'll be doing through, starting the end of this year and through the next year.
Okay, so you're going to actually have the test lab in your facility.
Oh,
So it's going to mirror the infrastructure you have currently on hand when you do the Oracle to SQL migration.
Correct.
Correct? Okay. I thought maybe, I kind of thought that from the way the conversation went, the guy was building a test lab in his house,
No.
so, okay, cool. That's,
Yeah, that's on one of our secure test
Okay.
servers.
so it's in your current operational environment?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. So then I go down and on page 1, metrics available to measure performance. I'm a nerd in this stuff because I did it for the Army. Okay. So when I see metrics available to measure performance, it gets me tingly inside. Database that supports all voter registration, election administration remains healthy and operational. What does this mean and how do you measure it?
Well, I'll tell you, if you show up at an early voting site and one of our securely connected laptops cannot connect to the database, then you can't vote.
Okay, so that's an example,
Yeah.
but how is it measured? Is there a formula? Most of these have a algebraic type formula where you can calculate what remains healthy and operational means. I mean, do you measure this at all, or it's just kind of by sight, by experiences, kind of subjective versus objective?
I think it's a little bit of both. So as I said, he works about 10 hours a week working on the health of the environment and reports to our IT manager. And so I haven't seen any reports of any issues. I honestly don't look at it. So in learning this new role. And so, but she is constantly in communication with me and reporting anything, but he is looking at reports. There are reports that measure the function of the database. So I think it's a combination of those types of tools that are used within the Oracle platform, as well as user experience.
Okay. On the next one, daily backups are successful. What's the criteria for that,
So as I
that they're successful?
So they're successful that the backup, so as I mentioned, back in '22, I believe it was in April, I'm sorry, I have a hard time with remembering dates, as you already saw. The reason why our database crashed is because the database wasn't able, the duplication to our second data center was not working, and it was throwing errors every time a record was trying to duplicate, and that overloaded the system and crashed it. So that would be an example.
So that's an example, but then, okay, so being successful is you have 0 errors in the transfer of data to the backup to, or something similar to that. So what I'm trying to get at is, in my experiences, when you see metrics and performance measures, you have a way to calculate that.
Yes.
And the way to calculate that is the contractor or the service provider reports to the customer, this is how I met that specific performance measure
Right.
and metric. And so it's kind of like, you know, I see some other contracts in the county and their reporting measures and the metrics available are pretty nebulous, you know. How many shots did I put in arms for the COVID vaccine? Well, you know. So, and that's what I'm just, because people wonder, you know, how are we reporting this? How are we holding the contractor accountable? Is there any penalty to the contractor if they don't meet a standard in a performance metric? And so those are the kind of things through my experiences in life. That's the world I lived in. It's rather vague. Let's just put it like that. So maybe next time we could, you know, get this kind of cleaned up a little bit.
Yeah.
95% database uptime. And then it says ensuring minimal disruption and high availability for our operations. So my understanding, uptime for Oracle has one meaning, but I always looked at the database uptime from my experiences as a measure of availability or reliability. So what does this mean here?
It's really just a matter of the database is accessible.
Okay, so
Does that mean 5% of the time the database is not accessible, so voters can't vote?
Hopefully not. There are times when the database will be offline for maintenance. That these types of things, we just finished in July a patching and substantial upgrade of the Oracle database appliances, which are the servers. And so there was a period of time when we were anticipating that we may not be able to access the database. It wasn't.
So that, in my experiences, that's a measure of reliability.
Yeah.
So if you took the database offline, and so you're not able to use it by anybody,
Right.
you factor that into the reliability equation, You factor that in to get your availability. Or did I say it backwards?
Backwards.
But
I
so
will
the-
say, yeah, I will say that anytime you do an upgrade, as you know, you have contingency plans for if you have to roll things back because something broke, basically, in the
Yes.
communication.
I know that.
We used to have a big problem with that on our recording side, but we haven't had that issue. The database is in beautiful shape and in health, and we're able to access it.
Okay, so the last one on that is prompt resolution, an average response time of under 2 hours, but critical issues. And it may seem I'm being nitpicky, but resolution and response time are two different things.
Right.
A response time is when the error, whether it's a network goes down, a user can't access his email, the database is discovered not to be available, then the meter for the response time to the service technician, database administrator, clock starts, okay?
Yep.
Then he responds, so that response time then is, I think, I don't know what your measure is, so does this person have 2 hours, 4 hours, you know? And then resolution is, once he starts, or she starts working on the issue, how long does it take to get fixed? So that's what resolution is. So on this one, I see a mixture of two different things. So, you know, in the future, if we could get some clarification on, to hold the contractor accountable.
Right.
And I've been on both sides of the contractor as a government employee, you know, that accountability that needs to be there to make sure that the contract is being adhered to. Then I think onto the exhibits, I had a couple questions.
Okay.
So on page 5 of what was given to the Board of Supervisors, on the start date is business day issues. If it is a severity 1 or critical issue, it will be addressed ASAP. Have you identified what severity 1 and critical issues are as the contract administrator?
Yes, it's the database not being available.
Database not being available is a critical issue.
Yes.
Okay. And then your other normal issues, end of the day, will be addressed and will be provided the solution. So what are some of the normal issues?
So whenever we update our voter registration application, a lot of times the database has to be stopped. Sorry, there's probably a better technical term for that. And so that would be something that would be coordinated ahead of time with the database administrator, contractor.
Okay. And then my last question on this. So the deliverable description, basically 7 to 12 hours per week. So basically the deliverable for the contractor is how many hours he worked for that week.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you're looking for.
Yeah.
You're not looking on how well he performed his job or any of those other things. It's just his invoice. That's the only deliverable you have. Is that correct?
That's the only documented deliverable in this document.
Okay.
Your comments about getting more detailed about what it is that we expect from the contractor have been taken. And in the future, we can add more detail to that.
Yeah, I think for clarification, Ms. Schubone, that for what the EIC does and looking at systems and processes of the electoral process for the public trust, those kind of items right there should be available for public review. Because when somebody that doesn't know IT looks at that and says, oh, all the guy has to do is produce an invoice, it doesn't, and from the people I talk to, it doesn't induce a lot of public trust. Couple more items. Talked about in length with the Board of Supervisors, and then Mr. Locks brought up the VPN situation where Mr. Prasado's working at his home, because that's where his LLC is headquartered at, in his home.
Yes.
He VPNs into the recorder subnet on the county network through a VPN,
Correct.
given to you by the IT department. Probably.
Our subnet is managed by our department, but, so there are 2 firewalls to get into our
Okay.
internal network.
Sure. So he has a VPN on his computer that he has at his business. Is that his personal computer or a county-owned computer?
The computer that he has on his business, I believe, is his personal computer. Yeah.
So he's using his personal computer, even though it's going through a VPN, to access the voter registration database.
Yeah.
So even with a VPN, and I can tell the guy's a smart guy, but malware, viruses, all this other stuff that's out there on the internet right now could be introduced some way onto his personal computer and could be forced in when he VPNs, and then you're going to crash the database. So if you're going to have a contractor doing this, I mean, we've outsourced basically to a third party the administration of the voter registration database. The contractor should be in the recorder's facility, or they should have a lockdown county-issued computer that can't do anything else but VPN into that database. So that is a big shortfall in the topology and the way that you're going about right now. So it doesn't give a lot of warm and fuzzies to the public trust and there's a lot more smarter people than me in this stuff in this area. So
I will say that the security of our network, it keeps us all up at night.
I know
We're on probably 6 calls a week with the federal government, the state government. We are constantly working on our security. It's always a concern.
Yeah. So to really verify and to make the integrity of the database as tight as it could, the gentleman should be working in your facility on a county provided computer. Okay. One final thing, and so with the admin privileges that he has, and Mr. Lux brought that up with the SIS and the IS, I don't know Oracle databases, that's why I hired a database administrator when I worked. But that would basically give them access to anything they can do, correct? Anything that's on that database, they can make configuration changes or whatever else. That's the way I look at it. So.
Yes, he has actually the highest level of security.
Okay, so what's the levels of security then?
All I'm saying is that he is the one individual who has access to all the function of the database.
And the data within the database also?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so here we have, like, once again, and so this is the concern I think that Supervisor Christie had, is here we're giving a third-party vendor complete control of the Pima County Recorder's voter registration database.
Yeah.
That does not ensure the public trust.
There's really no difference between when he was an employee with the county government and as a contractor with the county government in the sense of the access that he had with the database.
Sure.
These databases have to be managed by human beings. We have checks and balances in place for any kind of changes that are made to a voter's record. They're not going to be made at the database level. They're made at the application level. So,
They could be made at the database level, though.
And in that tenure, was it a personal computer or a county computer and facility?
he worked on a county computer when he was in the office. Occasionally, he would work from home as well. Some of our IT staff does work from home.
So the last question I have, and it came about in the discussion on the September 19th Board of Supervisors meeting, and they were talking about basically, I think, the grant, but this question was raised by Supervisor Christie. He asked about the status of the Recorder's Office contract with the outside consultant. In response, and this is a memo from Administrator Lesher, and I'll make sure that Vanessa gets it. In response to Supervisor Christie, I said that I thought the consultant worked on databases other than election and voter-related databases, period. That statement was incorrect, period. The consultant works on database health management, which includes work with such things as daily voter registration and voter records. So, does that mean he's doing data entry for voter registration stuff? What does that mean? Because when I read that, when I see such thing as daily voter registration and voter records, that's an entry-level database entry person's job, okay? When I read that.
Yeah.
And so, to me, as Joe taxpayer, that doesn't justify $124 an hour.
He is not doing data entry.
Was that?
He is not doing data entry. I will say that in the prior administration, our IT department was pulled to do data entry. He does not do data entry.
Okay.
I can't really speak to what the county administrator said. But
I would bet my bottom dollar, knowing Administrator Lesher like I do, she probably checked with the Recorder's Office before she made that statement. In my personal one-on-ones with Administrator Lesher, so.
Sure. He is not doing data entry. He is not
Okay.
looking at individual data files. He is looking at the health of the database.
But he can download the entire voter registration database to his home computer. He has that capability being the administrator, correct?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Chair Bickle, that's all the questions I have.
Are you sure?
Hey, I'm a nerd in this stuff, right? IT systems and processes, right? That's why I got hired for this job, man, because I know this stuff.
Okay. Commissioner Tillman.
Just one question. Since Mr. Prasad has special skills, is he doing any monitoring of your database employees? Is anybody being trained to do what he can do if he suddenly died tomorrow?
No, we have our backup plan is that have a Oracle contracted, it's a certified contractor that's licensed by Oracle that supported us in July with our upgrades and patches to our Oracle database. If something happened with Mr. Prasad, that would be our backup. But our long-range plan is to move off of the Oracle database, as we stated in the documentation and in the meetings. We plan to migrate to a SQL database in 2025. And the work that is needed to make sure that that migration is successful will be happening at the end of this year through next year in a test environment.
Commissioner Caswell.
Thank you. Based on that last statement, the contract is to run out in 2024 September prior to the election. So we will be in the middle of that process. So we will be entertaining another contract at that time?
Another extension to the contract.
Another extension.
The contract was written with 2 extensions.
Okay. So I understand that we're looking at a $90,000 a year contract, basically. We have 2 years that we have extended for. An hourly rate was given of $124. Just simple math would say 52 weeks at would equal 14 hours a week, and we have a contract for 7 to 12 hours a week. So if we're at 7 hours a week, we've paid about $214 an hour for his service, and if we're at 12 hours per week, we're about $144 per hour. We're nowhere near the $124 an hour. So what are those additional fees? If we're not at 14 hours a week work, we're not getting our $124 an hour contract.
So Mr. Prasad only bills the hours that he works, and in the first year of the contract, he only billed about $45,000. So we only pay what he works.
Kind of like paying a lawyer.
And what?
Kind of like paying a lawyer.
Yeah.
He's got billable hours.
He has billable hours and keeps track of the items that he bills us for.
Okay, any other questions?
Chair Bickle, can we take a quick 5 to make a run to the little boys' room?
Let me make a statement first. I'm going to.
Okay.
The fact that the Republican Party has the chair of their election integrity committee here, I'd like to make a little bit of a, I don't know what I'd call it, a disclaimer as far as what we've seen, heard, and done so far. And I know Commissioner Tillman knows. I believe Commissioner Kirshen knows. Had you been here on this commission under the prior administration in the recorder's office, the last about an hour, you'd have been talking to an empty chair. The recorder's office, even though it says so on the website, is not an ex officio member of this commission. They're here out of the kindness of the heart of the commission. And this commission is a board of supervisors appointed commission to deal with the elections department. And parties that are frustrated here, commissioners in the past of all political parties that are represented on here, because a lot of what the recorder's office does deals with elections. I will tell you, I get frustrated with it at times, but this commission has no responsibility or authority over the recorder's office. It's nice to have the information, but as a party-driven election integrity committee, you can do whatever you want to do. We are bound by the constraints of the organization that created us, and sometimes the supervisors forget the limited scope of authority they have over another elected official. So we're glad to have the recorder's participation. It's very informational, but they are basically a guest at our meeting, and I would like to see them treated as a guest at our meeting. And I would like to express my personal gratitude for the fact that we've developed a relationship with the recorder's office again that makes our job as commissioners a little bit easier, because we have information that we didn't have in the past. So, and now if you'd still like to take 5.
Thank you, Chair. Rather than duplicate that full ballot for that voters so that their choices are clearly understood, we can now look at certain cases. And that will be a blank ballot, undervoted, unclear marks, and I'll explain that one a little better, and overvotes. These are traditionally the cases where a voter, blank ballots can be blank, or it can be non-standard marks. So they're putting a check mark near but not in the oval, circling the name. So we'll look at blank ballots to make sure they didn't mark it in a non-standard way. Unclear marks can be they're using check marks and sometimes in the oval, sometimes not, or it could also come from tapping your pen on it while you're thinking, or sneezing in your pen, anywhere you accidentally put ink in one of those ovals may be an unclear mark. So we look at those to see, was that an actual attempt at voting or not? An overvote typically for us is corrections. They'll bubble in 2 people and then mark one as, oh, I didn't mean this guy. Alternately, sometimes we see ballots where they bubble in every single oval. And they may write a note saying, they're all the same. In that case, it truly is an overvote. So we want the system to know that. So in electronic adjudication, we're able to look at these 3 types of situations and interpret on a computer what the voter intended. So we don't have to necessarily recreate their whole ballot. We can just look at the spots that the EMS, election management system, says. Best guess it's an overvote, but let's have a human look at it. And so that essentially is electronic adjudication. Part of what we're doing, go ahead.
Ask you, since that kind of ambiguity, if one duplicate on the ballot is an overvote and you can resolve it, you do have to duplicate that whole ballot, right?
No.
No? Okay.
We can just update, essentially we're updating the cast vote record for that ballot to say this overvote was actually a vote for candidate A, or this overvote is a real overvote. And for adjudication, we're going to follow the same rule we do for duplication. It's a 2-person team of different parties who will do the first or the initial interpretation. Then we'll have a second team check their work and say, that's good, you did it correctly. Adding an additional level, permanent election department staff. None of this gets through to the EMS until permanent election department staff authorized to log into the EMS says, okay, all of that meets my approval. We're going to add that to the committed badge.
Director Hargrove.
Are you clear on what he's saying about the adjudication and the duplication?
I'm still not entirely clear.
Okay, so essentially what he's saying is that before we had the ability to do electronic adjudication, we would have to duplicate the entire ballot like you said. So if they overvoted one contest, we would have to duplicate the entire ballot. But since we can now look at it on a computer screen, because now the scanner can tell us, okay, I don't know what to do with this, it flags it, we get the file over, we can look at it on a different computer screen and see that, okay, the voter either did check marks, they overvoted the ballot intentionally, but at any rate, we would look at the ballot and make that determine the voter's intent without actually having to duplicate the entire ballot. So the only ballots we really have to duplicate are those that, if for some reason they mark through the timing marks and the machine cannot read it at all, the scanner cannot interpret that, it won't read it. If they, yes,
In the event of a court-ordered recount, you would have to go through that whole adjudication process on each ballot that had an error like that again?
Correct.
it's, yes, once it's run
So
through.
we aren't creating an accurate batch of the real ballots for a future recount if necessary. We're actually leaving the existing ballots unaltered or unduplicated.
They are, yes, we still have the existing ballots, and we still have a record of what we changed. If we needed to go back to court and just show it for some reason in a court order. But for a recount, yes, we run all the ballots through again. But yes, it's preserved. The ballot is preserved, it's not changed. There is a copy of that ballot in an electronic format as well.
And the vote totals are being electronically just altered to match what the ballot would have been if it had been duplicated.
Yes, sir, you're right, yes.
Okay.
So it saves some time, because what we normally do, we use the express vote, accessible voting equipment, and we go through and duplicate the entire ballot. So if it's 20 contests on that ballot, they sit there and they have to go through each one and duplicate it, and then another team has to then verify that they did that correctly with the voter's intent. So this gives us the ability to look at only the office that the scanner cannot read and make the decision of the voter's intent.
Can I interject a little bit here, since there appears to be a look of concern on Commissioner Kirshen's face. I did participate in the hand count audit for the recounts for whoever we did them for, the Board of School Superintendent of Public Instruction in the Attorney General's office, and happened to be the unfortunate person that had a ballot that was counted one way the first time it went through the machine and another way the second time it went through the machine, and it was a non-standard mark. And the non-standard mark was consistent for both of those races, but it only picked up one of them the second time through. So having the machines read things differently on a second iteration of reading the ballot is not something unusual, and that's why when it happens, human eyes have to look at it ultimately to rectify the situation. So, yeah, I don't see that this whole process is going to make things any faster as far as adjudication is concerned. I'll take your word for it, but
And
Probably
if
not
it
for
proves
the
not
first
to
couple
be,
of
we can
elections.
go back.
Yeah, probably not for the first couple of elections, because we're being very cautious, and, we're taking notes, and we're making sure that we understand clearly what the process is and how that's going to look, to make sure that everybody understands it, for transparency purposes as well. So, yeah, so it may take us, we may not go very fast for the first two elections, but hopefully when we do get to the election where there are 20,000 or more possible ballots that need to be duplicated, that we can cut that in half and use the electronic adjudication.
no,
Chairman Bickle and I were both at the same recount, and we did see quite a few non-standard marks. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
maybe 1 in 100 ballots had non-standard marks, which would possibly be counted differently every time they were recounted.
well, they can either be counted as marked or not marked. They can't be counted, but you never know what it's going to do when it goes through, and that's. I will say that when we did the software install in the spring, the update, talking with the people from ES&S, if I understood what he explained to us, people get concerned that there's erroneous marks that are being counted that show up on the ballot somewhere. And they've actually taken and blacked out an entire ballot with the exception of the ovals and the timing marks. And the timing marks, for those of you that don't know, are all the little bars around the outside of the envelope that tell the computer what race this is for and what precinct this is in and all the other information that's critical. But for all practical purposes, a completely black sheet of paper, except for little ovals all over the place. And it counted 0 votes marked on that ballot. It is very tightly controlled as to where the mark has to be in order to register some kind of activity as far as counting that vote is concerned. So, a pen drop somewhere outside the oval isn't going to trigger an overvote. A pen drop in the oval may trigger an overvote. So it's a pretty sensitive system. And actually, if you have the opportunity, and since the Libertarian Party is relatively small, having somebody from the Libertarian Party as a party representative in the tabulation room can't be you this election. Is something that's watching the system work and understanding how it works allays a lot of fears. When I first started doing this stuff, we had racks and racks of paper ballots in the boardroom because you physically took the overvoted or the spoiled ballot and took an exactly the same copy of the ballot. The party of one part read the results to the party of the second part, who marked the bubbles on the ballot. Then they traded places, and the party that was marking read the ballots that they've marked back to the party of the first part to make sure that we had it done. We're now using express votes for duplication, is my understanding. All of those racks and racks of extra paper ballots went away, but literally tens of thousands of ballots were there, so that we made sure we had enough ballots for any duplications that needed to be done. So it is a changing process, and I'd like to think it's changing for the better rather than for the worse. But there is still a human element that gets involved in any kind of a recount or a dispute. The only thing that I will say, and it is the constitutionally mandated secret ballot, is you can never, once the ballot comes out of the affidavit envelope and those two are separated, you can't marry a ballot up to an individual again. Although we've had people of my party who said, you need to put a code on there somewhere so I can know that it's my ballot. Once you can identify a ballot, that's no longer a secret ballot. And as long as we're required to make the ballot secret, you'll never get to the point where you can identify a particular ballot being cast by a particular voter, which is the reason we do some, and I'll segue into you being the next one on the agenda, but part of the re-precincting that we do is if you only have one registered voter in a precinct, they no longer have a secret ballot because that shows up as the only ballot cast in that precinct. And if they were the only registered voter in that precinct, it's not a secret ballot. So we've got to blend these people together so that they're not out there all by themselves. And even, I think, the most that you're dealing with now is 3 or 4 registered voters in some of the combinations. And
I think
it's been a day or two since I looked at that report, but it's not very many. But you also, because you have multiple parties, you can determine who cast which ballot, and that's something that also indicates re-precincting. And if there's no more questions on adjudication,
And Chairman Bickle, I have one as well.
I had the opportunity to watch the testing of the system with some test ballots, and I came into this pretty skeptical about this, thinking that it was going to slow down the process if you have to do it every time. David, could you explain what state of the process the adjudication comes in?
So first, we have to have scanned ballots or for us to know that the machine has any trouble interpreting them. So as soon as we have started tabulation, then we can start adjudication. And that's basically where it comes into the process. They cannot finish until after I've run the last ballot through the DS-850s, because we won't know if there's any in that last batch that needs adjudication. So they're they start a little after tabulation and they'll finish a little after, but basically the same time, because it is essentially part of tabulation.
I was very impressed with how quickly this system actually works, that they can go through a bunch of maybe 20 ballots in one batch and process them fairly quickly, and then the record is adjusted for those ballots. And it's a pretty neat system, and I was also glad that they continue, they're still checking from each party at 2 stages of the process, so they're still checking accuracy.
Yes, and the example you saw was our LNA, and so the timeline is a little condensed because, we'll run our ballots, then we'll do the adjudication, then we'll commit everything and make sure all of our values are correct. There may be a larger lag time between when we run the ballots, because we're also going to restrict our adjudicators a little. We'll have them do a batch at a time so that matches what we're processing, so we can understand all the pieces through and make sure we have all the checks and balances we need. And if we do it, the batch I'm talking about here is not the recorder's batch, but the number of ballots that go through the machine at one time. So that's generally 500 ballots, or in about that mark. And hopefully if people bubble in their ovals, the number of ballots needing to be adjudicated for each batch should be fairly small, but we'll find out.
I have one more comment. Brian indicated earlier trying to persuade the libertarians to participate. Peter, who is in the audience here, has been at every tabulation that I have been at recently, and the libertarians have been very dedicated. They also participated in the hand count audit in the last election. So just give them some credit. They are working.
Commissioner Caswell.
Thank you, Chairman Bickel. Mr. Wisely, I have a couple of questions, maybe some comments. I worked in the ballot processing and tabulation signature room, all the processes in 2020, and I remember a overvote situation or ballot issue with the Green Valley Fire District and Continental Fire District. I believe there was an issue when you came out of the tabulation room, explained it to me how the optical eye is viewing that oval. But that specific election, I was led to believe that that may have been part of that issue, is that we had an issue on that timing or that optical eye for that specific recount. And since that time, we've moved to this vote center model, which is concerned, or because in a precinct that is Green Valley or in those fire districts, it's easy to pull those ballots or those precinct and voting centers in precinct that are affected. Now they can be strung throughout multiple boxes within our balloting. So that's one thing I'd like if you could address that, because I know that was an issue in that 2020 and the Green Valley fire referendum. Also, I'd like to ask on the duplication process during that time. The only place I was not permitted to do any observation was the duplication cubicles. And so I understand you have two-party representation there, but is there observation of party officials there, whether Libertarian, Republican, or Democrat? I do believe that it's important that that is also part of the process. So knowing that I wasn't able to participate at that time, and that it is separated outside of the ballot processing room, it's not on camera, it's done by express vote, and it's done in cubicles.
So,
Mr. Wisely, let me answer the second part, and I'll
oh,
let you answer.
okay, that was the easy one, I was gonna answer that one first.
So
Thank
there
you.
is observation allowed in every section. I wasn't here in 2020, I don't know what happened in 2020. Anywhere that there's a ballot being handled, there's a camera. And duplication, anybody who observed or wanted to observe that the parties assigned on last year were able to observe the duplication as well as the tabulation in the ballot processing room. It's the same way this year. I've communicated with all the parties, I've met with the Republican Party, I've sent out emails to everyone is aware of the timeline and that they can be there to observe if they choose to do so. So to answer that question, now, wasn't here in 2020, so I'm not sure what happened with the ballots. I'll let Mr. Wisely handle that one.
Okay. If I remember the discussion we had, what had happened in that 2020 ballot was there was a correction or a change in the language of a proposition, and that required us to go back in, and that shifted the oval position a little bit, and that ballots created after that was not, there was a flaw in our procedures that allowed the ballot, the PDFs to get out and use the previous one and not the final one after that shift in position. And that only affected the last race on a couple of ballot styles, and that's why we went through and manually looked at all of those ballots and corrected for that mistake. And that was seen when we started to do release results, we were able to see unexpected results. So when we investigated, we saw, oh, this is a problem. We were able to look at the system interpretation of the ballots, and we could see that the expected position for those ovals was not where they actually were. So that's what caused. We instituted more safe to make it, and our testing is more complete now to protect it. Or if we make that mistake before, which we protected against, we can discover it before it ever gets to our printer. Brian mentioned, or Chair Bickle mentioned that he had seen a test where they blank out the entire ballot. We can do something similar now, and we did do it for our internal test, our internal LNA. We mark every possible oval position except the ones we're using, and run that through the system as part of our test now, so that we know if we've done something we did not expect. So yes, that was a problem for those two elections, caused because we went back in late in the system and made a correction that shifted those down. Part of our testing now is to make sure we've not done that, and a checklist to say if we have to go back in and change something, we finalize, we walk through everything, and we recreate everything from that point forward.
Thank you.
But yeah, that was not fun.
Hey, Chair Bickle.
Commissioner Beresny.
Yeah, just for the record, and I definitely don't want to step all over my fellow Commissioner Caswell, but for the record, that was for the Green Valley Fire District bond and the Continental Elementary School District Governing Board elections for 3 members. That was the 2 elections that were involved.
I certainly remember the Continental School Board election. That was a nightmare. quick question. Is the electronic adjudication done on the DSS 850?
Sorry, Cheryl.
No, thank you.
No, it's done on, 850 identifies a problem, but then it's on a workstation.
I remember watching those.
In another room on workstations.
Okay.
I wanted to clarify something that Commissioner Caswell mentioned, that in one election, some people were not allowed to observe the duplication, and there was no camera. This was an unusual situation, and the duplication was done in individual cubicles, and there was no camera for each of those cubicles. So that was that problem. It was a space situation, and it's no longer done that way. And also the problem of not being allowed to observe duplication, the parties have to supply a list of people for ballot processing and a separate list for duplication room. And so if people only applied for the processing, they were not allowed to see the duplication. So that's just a clarification of how it happened.
To address that follow-up, I did get help from Mary Martinson at the time and Pam Franklin, and I was allowed to do a brief walkthrough and observation to see what was happening in that area. There was plenty of room to accommodate observation, in my opinion.
Okay, anything else? Mr. Wisely, update on re-precincting.
Basically, I think all we need to say is that the Board of Supervisors did approve a set of consolidations. You may have gotten a PowerPoint or a PDF of the list that they approved and
The maps.
little map. The little arrow would say those two are now being renamed to this. And so the process should go like, the changes should be made in January of next year. There's a few more things to do, but basically, they've approved those changes.
So in reading that report, is what you did or somebody did move either JP lines or supervisor district lines so that those little bitty pieces?
They've agreed to that. Whether or not that process is complete, I'm not sure.
Okay. Director Hargrove.
Yeah, so the process, so my intent is to make sure that the board and this commission knows the steps that we are taking before January, before they're implemented. So you will understand everything that has happened. So the process has just really just started.
Okay. Anything else? Director Hargrove, update on the election department security plan.
Yes, I really don't have a whole lot to say about that, except for when I came on board last year, that was a big thing. There was a lot of questions about the security plan. Had it been updated? Was I going to update it? Of course, we were updating it, but with everything that was happening last year, we didn't complete it and post it anywhere. We've taken the time to actually go through and take a look at the security plan and update it. It is a living document, so as you're looking at it now, it could change in a few weeks, but right now, this is our final security plan. Public security plan, I should say, because there is a security plan that if we divulge that information would no longer be secure. So this is our public security plan that we will post on our website for individuals that we give out to the board. And if you have any questions about it, please ask, and Mr. George will be happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions? Hearing none, moving right along. A discussion of the Elections Department third quarter report.
Yes, so I think you all are probably aware that I have been producing a quarterly report all year, and this is the quarterly report. And I kind of combined a lot of stuff in here and pulled it together, talking about the things that we've done this year. So I had a set of priorities for the year, you know, evaluating vote centers, which is an ongoing process that never stops. We evaluate vote centers all the time, because vote centers come and vote centers go. So we continue to evaluate vote centers, the ones that we have in place. Staff has gone out this year, within the last quarter, started taking a look at those vote centers for accessibility, functionality, and the space that we have available to us. They're going in and taking a look to see how many of the new voting booths we can actually get into a vote center, because the number of voting booths that we can put in a vote center will help us reduce the lines that can occur on election day. So we do an analysis and a look. We've taken a look at vote centers. We've taken a closer look at the 10X software, making sure that we understand of 10X software. We have a whole suite, house management, equipment management. It's just, we have an entire suite. And so we took a look at that. We've been working very hard on implementing all of the phases to the 10X software. In addition, and I'm just kind of overviewing here. In addition to that, we have completed our online training platform, which I'm very excited about. So the online training, which is also a part of the 10X suite, is complete. And so we also have the poll worker work group that Mr. George works with, taking a look at that training to give us feedback as to how we can make it better, tweak it, before we get into the 2024 election cycle. The individuals who will be working at vote centers on election day, the Vail vote centers, have the opportunity to take this training and give us feedback as well. So we will be able to tweak it and assign certain portions of it that will be required to poll workers. There will always be an in-person poll worker training that's never going to go away. Even if it could, I would require my inspectors to attend an in-person training, because I feel like they need to have that interface where they can ask questions and bring up any concerns. So that's done, and that's done. So my first three priorities I've tackled. I've not tackled the last one, which is the Voter Academy, which is high on my priority list right now, but not as high as getting through November 7th, but higher on my update list of we are now. So, and what we've been able to, kind of an update as to where we are now, and what we've been able to accomplish this year. We've accomplished a lot. We've been very busy this year, and staff has been very busy. Mr. George and the tech team and the warehouse team, they've loaded up trucks, they've taken the equipment out to vote centers, they've set it up, they've done testing for Equator points and all of those things. And we're in a better feel like we're in March. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Is the online poll worker training session generally available?
We can make it available. It is not available just to the public.
Would you make it available to the commissioners, please?
Sure, Mr. George will have to set you up and get you that information so you can take the training. Yeah.
I think it would help. It would help us understand, for those of us that have never been a poll worker because we've done something else. It would help us understand what they go through and understand the process that actually occurs on election day.
Yes, we can do that if, I think many of y'all are already in the system, you've worked hand-count audits or anything like that. So other than that, it's basically just get your email address and we can get you set up pretty easily.
Okay.
Great. Chairman Bickle, I have a few questions. Thank you, Constance, for the report, our Ms. Director Hargrove. I appreciate that. We had a conversation earlier this year about the vote centers, and there is a statement in here that the elections department continues to lose vote centers because of safety concerns. I do know that when we had addressed this issue, that centered around schools and school districts that were not participating in vote centers at this time. Do you have any further information on that? And I do have a few other questions, but I'll just take them one at a time to make it easier. Is there further information? Do we know that there are school districts that are going to be pulling vote centers in the 2024 cycle?
Commissioner Caswell, they notify us when they make the decision. So I cannot anticipate which schools may not be available. But I will say that we started the process in August of sending out contracts and information to the facilities to see if they will be available for the PPE election in March. Schools, we can't do anything with beyond March with schools because their school year begins again in July. So beyond March, we've not heard of any other schools that are not available. But I do want to just point out that losing vote centers or polling places is very common. And that's the reason why it's in statute that if there's an emergency need for a polling place, then this is what you do. It's in the Elections Procedures Manual. It's also in statute. So there is no concern that we will not have enough vote centers for any election next year. There's no concern at all. But we may lose more schools and we may lose some other facilities. It's very common. So.
Thank you. Also, we had some centers that were centered up in the northwest side of town. Is there any movement on some of those vote centers being mitigated? I know the Dove Mountain area and others didn't have as much access to vote centers in a close proximity, and that was a concern. Is there any movement there that you've been able to find any alternatives?
So we've added the Highlands at Dove Mountain, which pretty much eliminates that 15-minute drive for voters in that area. We still have 2 other vote centers in that area, and we did lose a school, Amphi, in Amphi district, but anyone who voted at that vote center, it's between 1 mile to 3 miles to Orvalla Public Library from that vote center, so they are still accommodated in that area.
Terrific. I know that many people are asking and looking at the 2024 already, so I'm being asked about the vote center issues. On the document, we have a statement here that the department will monitor approximately 17 locations through August of 2024's primary and make any necessary adjustments before the November 2024 general election. When I was an inspector in the prior election in 2022, my vote center was affected between the primary and the general. It was an emergency situation at the Legion where we had damage to storm damage. It's very difficult when that happens, alerting the public. We had several voters going to that voting center that day and very confused that they couldn't vote at their normal vote center because of that. But no notice was really provided publicly. They felt they had traveled to the vote center and found out at the vote center. And the complaint I received is that the county didn't do enough to have notice at the vote center that it was closed for the day. So it had a lot of traffic coming into the Legion asking those questions. But my question is here, what 17 locations are being monitored in this time?
I do not have that list with me, but the reason why I'm monitoring those locations is to make sure that they're not long lines. So it's not that we will not have a location, a site there. The vote center is not moving. I just want to make sure that we're accommodating voters as best we can. And as I monitor them, then I may make the determination if there is a facility close by, either to add another vote center near there or to change the vote center to somewhere that can accommodate the number of voters that would want to vote there.
Thank you. It would be nice to look at that list to see what locations you may have some concerns about, and that way we can give any feedback as well. And my last address here is that we plan to use the Express Vote accessible marking device as a backup if the ballot on demand printer stops working. I know that we've discussed this prior in our year, that we are not using a paper ballot backup system now. So I know people, as an inspector, were very concerned about even opening any of those paper ballots, considering we had so many to account for. But my concern is now that that is the backup system, we only had about 50 sheets of Express Vote papers. So are we going to be receiving more of the Express Vote system papers in the event we move to that emergency system?
Absolutely, you will receive more paper, and in addition, you will receive more Express Votes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Bickle.
Any other comments, questions, additions, deletions, corrections? Future agenda items, if you have any today?
Chair Bickle, yes. We talked about, during the call to the public, about a field trip up to the Runbeck facility. I think that's a great idea. So if we could add a discussion on how we can make that happen after the election in next month. And also, after the last meeting we had in August, I had a sidebar with Ms. Heiser and talked about a tour of the recorder's office and the processes that go on there. She had stated that it would best if the whole commission, we'd hit it at one time. I got a one-on-one with the elections department, but she has suggested the whole commission. So I'd like to talk about the feasibility of doing that also. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Next scheduled meeting is November 17th. Anybody have any problems with that?
Maybe, but you guys don't need me to have a meeting. So, of course, we will be finalizing the election results and getting it ready for campus on the 21st.
Okay. I would assume the same from the recorder's office. Okay. Anything else? Hearing none, this meeting stands adjourned. Stands adjourned.